Hello everyone, I'm making this video to give you my thoughts, my real thoughts this time, not the first impressions I gave a couple of days ago. So, Chapter 10. After a shaky release of the early access, essentially the early access was brought down to 1 day instead of 2 days for Europe. I have very mixed feelings about this chapter based on whether I play an Imperial Agent or another class. To me personally, the chapter felt like one of the better chapters when playing the Imperial Agent and one of the worst chapters when playing the Jedi Knight or whatever, something else. Overall, the chapter is relatively short. It's less than 30 minutes of story and about the same time of gameplay. And the gameplay, the very end, final boss fight, so to speak, has a couple of cool mechanics, but the rest is flat out boring and repetitive. All of the chapter is basically click thing, kill waves of enemies, click another thing, kill second wave, and so on and so forth. In fact, after a couple of walkthroughs, I figured out that you can just skip almost everything. Like you click whatever it is that you click, and then you run to the elevator, and you can click the elevator even if you're in combat. So about 2/3 of the chapter's gameplay you can easily skip. Just click the thing, and when the enemies come, ignore them and run for the elevator, and it works. So that's what I started doing after a couple of walkthroughs. So from a gameplay perspective, nothing impressive. From a story perspective, reasonably good if you're an Imperial Agent and if you cared about the story and if you cared about Kaliyo. If not, the chapter is pretty bad, I have to say. If you're playing the Jedi Knight, for example, you go to Zakuul, you meet Kaliyo, and you help her blow up something and then go back. That's it. And especially if you're light side, and here's the spoiler, so skip like 20 seconds in the future. If you go dark side, Koth leaves, which is interesting. I'll talk more about that towards the end. But yeah, if you're light side, basically nothing interesting happens. You cannot romance Kaliyo. Especially I was disappointed that there was no reference to the meeting between the Jedi Knight and Kaliyo. They actually met in the Jedi Knight story. I've played through that. It's part of Doc's conversations. Even have a video about that. I may actually leave it in the description if you want to check it out. But as part of the Jedi Knight story, you actually meet Kaliyo. She comes to the ship, you hear her name, and so on and so forth. And now that you meet, there is no reference to that whatsoever. They completely forgot about that. So, playing another class, you cannot romance Kaliyo, you don't get to know her very well, you don't get almost anything interesting, really. The only thing that the chapter really has going on is this theme of how a sort of utopian society that is very advanced, very careless, and so on, deals with the whole presence of Kaliyo and the little seeds of anarchy that she plants here and there. That was interesting, but it wasn't deep enough to me. It was like briefly touched here and there. If it is expanded upon in the future chapters, it will be interesting, but I doubt it will be. So that was really the only interesting thing going on, and half interesting at that. There are some interesting and subtle touches that I really liked. That's why I have mixed feelings. In fact, someone commented that this chapter felt like an Imperial Agent only chapter, and I sort of agree. Now, when you play the Imperial Agent, you get a little bit of unique dialogue from Kaliyo on almost every scene, in every conversation with her. You get a much better sense of how she's changed and how she's grown, what her real goals are, what her real motivations are, and that's really good. You can see that from the beginning she's really hostile, she acts almost crazy when she sees you, but then as the chapter progresses you learn a bit more in every conversation, and it's revealed how even though she's trying to be this terrorist, she's sort of grown milder. She's grown into a less chaotic personality, is probably a good description. Also more emotional, and it is hinted that that's connected to the loss she suffered when she she and the Imperial agent got separated. Most likely, the Imperial agent was her only real friend, or the closest thing to a friend she has ever had, and losing that connection made her feel as though her life no longer has meaning. At one point, she sort of implies that this is an act of vengeance for Zakuul killing you, and she says, "Don't be stupid," or something like that, but there is something in that. And that is also emphasized, and I could be reading too much into this, but I feel like there's a connection. When you play the story as a non-Imperial agent, that was my first playthrough, it was on the Jedi Knight, at the very end, when you try to convince her not to blow up the city, you say something along the lines of, "Don't do this, Kaliyo, this will not bring back what you've lost." And she looks at you and she says, "Nothing can bring back what I've lost." I felt like it's a little bit of overreaction, like, what did she lose? It seemed a little unnatural. I didn't think she would care that much. I thought she would be more like, what was his name? Tano Vic? You know, I thought she would just move on. And she doesn't say anymore. She also refuses to reveal who she worked for when you meet her as the Jedi Knight, for example. She doesn't want to talk about it. And so, based on what she says when I played the Imperial agent after that, I realized that she's probably really hurt from losing the Imperial agent, losing that friend or whatever. You know, you can be a lover if you're a male. I wasn't, but still. And also, not to mention that when you play the Imperial agent, at one point she flat out says that she's no longer the woman she used to be. And ultimately, at the end of the chapter, we have to make the decision whether to just blow up the droid control or, you know, the whole thing. You can, as the Imperial agent, I said that in the title of the video, appeal to her better nature. And it's surprising that if I had just met her, I would not think that would be possible, but after playing through a chapter, I thought it will probably work, and it did. And it was a very good scene. She also gets a little bit softer at the very end in the cantina scene, so yeah, I have to say that the chapter is pretty good. I liked it as an Imperial agent, though. However, as a non-Imperial agent, it's just not so good. I mean, all this weight, if you don't have an Imperial agent, or if you have an Imperial agent but you didn't care about Kaliyo. And overall, I don't rate the chapter very high. Because yeah, it's good for one character, but for the others, it's not. So those were my thoughts, basically. And now to mention the spoiler thing again, people who don't want spoilers can go away. We are talking about Koth leaving the Alliance. That was a nice touch. I approve. A lot of people have said that this has sort of restored their faith in the game, in the fact that choices matter in the game and so on. I would say that we have to wait and see first, because imagine next chapter starts off by Arkan attacking some Odessen or something, and all of a sudden Koth, if he didn't leave, dies in the defense, dies in the cutscene, and you can't do anything about it. That wouldn't really be choices matter, because it will be he's gone if you go dark side and he's dead if you go light side. Or maybe if he just never shows up and never does anything else if he's alive. So to say that choices truly matter, he should have some sort of involvement in the story that you cannot otherwise have if he's gone. But in the end of the day, this is what should happen. This is what should be the norm, right? We shouldn't look at something like Koth leaving and say, oh my god, they did a tremendous job by making this choice, make this companion leave. I mean, if we look back to other BioWare titles like Dragon Age Origins, hell, you have a whole bunch of companions there, and every single one of them can either die or leave, or both options are available throughout the game based on your choices. And now, also, I didn't talk about this, but again, it was somewhat of a disappointment that there was absolutely no romance references. And yeah, that's pretty much all of it, all that I had to say. In the next chapter, we have Jorgen coming. If I have to guess, Jorgen giving the middle finger to Suresh. Dorn is not shown. Some people have asked whether Dorn is coming back in the next chapter. I don't know. It'll be nice to see all of Havoc Squad come back, really. I mean, we already have Yoon. We already have Vic, who's not coming back. We have the droid, what was his name? 4X. So, yeah, I'd love to see both Jorgen and Dawn, but based on what they've said in the live stream, probably only Jorgen. Regardless, I'm curious to see what will happen. I hope it's a better chapter overall, that you won't have to play as a trooper in order to get the value of it. And yeah, that's all. I hope we see Gus Tuno as well. Now, there was a nice sort of Easter egg, not Eastern, with Blizz talking to Gus Tuno. I'm gonna play my smuggler soon. I want to see if he's gonna recognize the voice, and I'll make a video about that if he does. The HK stuff is nice, I guess. So yeah, the Alliance contracts are good, but the chapter could use a little more work. So that was it. Thank you for watching this rambling video about Chapter 10, and until next one, stay tuned and be good.